it is time for us to rank all of the Star Wars shows that we have seen by the tier list rankings. So, welcome back, Kevin. Welcome
Yeah,
back, new viewers. I know
thanks.
last week we ranked all of the movies and we had quite a few new viewers. So, thank you for watching that. And if you are back with us today, we're glad you're here. We're going to try to go through these in a similar manner and definitely let us know in the comments as we're going through this what your rankings are, what you think about each of these shows as we go through. So, have you thought like much about this leading up to tonight, or are you just kind of going in blind on them?
Yeah, this was honestly a little bit harder
Yeah.
because it's different weighing shows that are incomplete to shows that are complete and animated to live action.
Mm-hmm.
It was a much more different process than thinking about the movies. So um, yeah, it was interesting.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I am going a little bit more because, like, I'll be honest, I just watch like an episode of a show here or there if it's not
Yeah,
going on. Like, I haven't rewatched them the way I do the movies. So I
yeah,
had to, it's going to be much more emotional and just kind of spur of the moment. Like, oh, what do I feel about it right now? But for sure, like shows that are in their completion, I feel like are going to have either an edge or
yeah.
maybe a disadvantage too. It can go kind of either way. The shows that haven't finished yet, they probably have a little more grace and wiggle room.
Yeah. Though, but to be fair, there's also, like in my mind going through this, there were two shows that I didn't rank as high because I'm still waiting to see what they become, right? Like I feel like I can't call them masterpieces yet because it's still an unfinished product.
I have one
So,
that's that way,
yeah,
potentially two now. We'll talk about it,
I think
but
I got two of them in there.
yeah, and I'm kind of torn on it. So let me get this screen up here.
All right.
Oh, are we going? There we go. Okay, so
Ah,
screen is up, and let's make it bigger for us to see. There should be a way that I can do that. Nope. There we go. Okay, so screen is up. All of our shows are here at the bottom. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do, just for the sake of fairness, I'm gonna move Resistance and Young Jedi Adventures to this haven't seen, if that's okay with you.
yes. I haven't seen them, so
I have not seen 30 seconds of Resistance. I actually have seen a few Young Jedi Adventures. We will just kind of like when we leave the house, we'll turn on the Disney Junior or whatever for our dogs just so something's on. And
yeah,
so I've caught a couple of those. They're kind of funny, like cutesy as far as a kid's show
sure.
goes. But I have not seen nearly enough to be like, oh, this is a B or a C or something like that. So just for the sake of that, we'll leave it out. So if y'all are like Young
Yep.
Jedi Adventures or Resistance fans, I apologize. I haven't got into those, but let us know what you think about them in the comments. So,
Yeah, see if you
the
can sell us on it.
yeah, if you can sell me on
I just haven't
yeah,
Resistance. I just never watched. I don't know why. I just never took the time to do it. And then the other one, I don't know. Maybe my kids will get into it. We'll see. And then I'll end up watching it.
I feel like for Resistance, maybe I don't know that the marketing has been there for like when it was happening.
Yeah.
Like it came out on real TV, right? Like, or was it Disney Plus only? I
Hmm.
feel like it came out on the Disney, like Disney XD
I
or
think
something
it.
like that, or Disney
Yeah, I
Channel.
think it did.
Yeah, so maybe that's kind of like Disney Plus just does much better marketing. But what we're gonna
Hmm.
do, we're gonna alternate as best as we can with the numbers, like between an animated and a live action, just so we don't all get bogged down on one or the other.
Yep.
So I think the Clone Wars is a good place to start because I feel like it's the patriarch of the Star Wars series,
It
right? Like
is.
it
Yeah,
has been here from the beginning. So
that's
I've
true.
seen I have seen the majority of the Clone Wars. So like when it was getting up to, is it season 6, the final season? Disney Plus did like a definitive episode list and hit you through all the big points from each
Hmm.
season. So I might have saw like eight-ish episodes per season, maybe more or less, depending on the one. But you've seen it all, right?
Yeah, and season 7 I think was the last one. 6 was
7.
kind of like a half season because I think that's when it got canceled. They were trying to wrap it up before
Okay,
they came back for that final season 7 or whatever. Um,
gotcha.
Yeah, no, I had done the same thing. I did basically a essential guide watch just to kind of get the gist of it. But then I
Yeah.
did go back and sit down and actually watch them all the way through when I had time. And so I I think I like it better as an essential guide thing. um,
Yeah.
but it was but yes, I have seen all of it. To your
Okay.
point.
So for me personally, now I've watched more than just the Essential Guy because I've really tried getting into it a time or two.
Yeah,
And early on, it's just pretty hard because it is a kid
yeah,
show. Like at its core, now the last season they took it kind of to another level, and then certain arcs are not quite a kid show.
yeah,
But I just had a hard time buying in. But I was at MegaCon and went to the Clone Wars panel. I think we talked about that the other day,
yeah.
and I have you a poster, by the way, from that. But
I know, I saw it. That looks awesome.
it's awesome. After listening to like Matt Lanner and Ashley Eckstein talk about the Clone Wars and stuff, I want to give it a go around again. Just hearing from the
Mm,
voice actors in it and kind of knowing like how the sausage was made. I do want to get a little more into it, so I may give it more. But for right now, me personally, it's a B. If you're not familiar with the rankings, S is like the best thing we've ever seen. A is great. B is average. It's not bad. It's not incredible. C is below average, and D is eh. So it's kind of where we're at here. I would give it a B. What do you feel as a whole?
yeah, I think I fell in an A category.
Okay.
Um, it man, the initial early on, it's very much episodic vignette like, where it's just kind of
Yeah.
really drop here and there. But I do think once they were figuring out storytelling and what they wanted it to look like, but once they hit their stride in terms of this show being Ahsoka's story and the clone story, and once they figured out that it was about them and ultimately their relationship, I think at that point it becomes an incredible show. Um, I mean, season 7 is some of the best Star Wars TV, I think. And so I have some of it really high, but then that other stuff is definitely, it's enjoyable, but it's not anything that pulls me back in. I feel like I got to watch again. So I kind of averaged it out at like an A, because I think there's some really good storylines in there, and I do love the clones, and I like that a large portion of it becomes about them and who they are and their interactions with each other and with the Jedi. Once it hits that stride, I think it's a great show. Um, but it's not always a great show. So
Yeah, I mean, and you can throw in like the Mortis arc. You can throw
yeah,
in,
yeah,
is it Barriss Offee when she's like turns into a terrorist? That arc
yeah.
where like Ahsoka walks away. You've
Excuse me.
got
Yeah,
all of, I don't want to say all of season 7. I want to say like 90% of season 7 is
yeah. It kicks
incredible.
off a little slow. Yeah,
It does for me, but you do make a good point. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Like a show that's in its completion might get an edge. So I could
mm,
say A on it just because once it really gets rolling, it does have a good complete story, and that
yeah.
ending is like a gut punch. I don't know
Oh,
about
it
you,
is. It's
but
so good.
it's
Yeah. No,
so
it
good.
is.
And
And one of the reasons it's so good is because, like I said, about I don't know if it's midway through or a third in, like they start to really focus on the clones, right? And I think that was the smartest thing they did, was not
Mhm.
make the Clone Wars show really just about the Clone Wars, but really about the clones. Like that, making us understand and care about that group was really smart, and it does, man. It makes the ending so much so much sadder. But I
Yeah.
think that's what makes it a great show is the way it is able to focus in and hone in on this group, that really was just a bunch of faces, right? Before this show, there
Numbers.
wasn't a whole lot of character to them at all, and so
Yeah.
yeah,
I can get behind that. So if I mean, there's some parts of it that are very much C level, and then there's S moments
I
as
agree.
well. So
Yeah,
I can
I
lean
agree.
towards A just because Dave did it. It adds a ton of lore.
It
I mean, I
does.
completely forgot like Dathomir and everything. We get Maul and Savage. Like
Yeah,
you get
there's
a lot of
a
good.
lot with the
You
Night
get a lot of good
Sisters. Yeah,
elements.
yeah.
Okay, so A sounds good for me. So um, let's go from here to the Book of Boba Fett.
Mm.
So You can lead us
aka
off on this one.
Mando 2.5.
Mando 2.5, two and a quarter. I don't
Um,
know.
I I have Book of Boba Fett at a C. And not because I didn't enjoy it. I love his character, and I think it was interesting. It's just it was all over the place, and then it kind of became the Mandalorian, and it wasn't really the Book of Boba Fett. And then I don't know. To me, just the continuity, or not the continuity, the cohesiveness of it just wasn't there. It felt like a lot of pieces that were trying to be forced into a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Um,
Yes.
I have high hopes for whatever's next with it because again, I love Tamara Morrison and I'm excited to see him continue to play this character. But the show itself, just especially comparing it to some of the other stuff, it didn't hit all the paces I think it was trying to. It was engaging. I enjoyed it, but it was a little messy for me.
Yeah, I enjoy it. There's some episodes that are kind of boring, which is like it starts off a little slow.
Yeah,
Um, I have an issue with Boba Fett being a softie at this point. Like, you just
it's a
go
little
from
odd.
being
Yeah,
in the OT, he's like supposed to be this cold blooded killer,
yeah,
and Star Wars is about change of hearts and stuff like that, I guess. So whatever. But just seeing him try to be like this, almost like a government type leader of his own little crime syndicate, it seemed out of place for me
yeah,
personally. I like the Mando stuff, but again, it's not necessarily a story I needed. We talked about this with Solo last year. It's nothing that I'm like laying awake at night going, man, what happened with
yeah.
Boba Fett? I can,
Right.
which I guess you do want to know now that they resurrected him for the Mandalorian, but at the same time, it's not like he could be dead going into the Sarlacc pit for all I care. I'm glad he's back and Tamora has work and all that, but
Yeah,
it's not like we needed it. I think it may be a missed opportunity to tell a different story, but who knows?
I agree.
I will say
Yeah.
though,
I'm sorry.
have you seen the meme where it's like like wheeling the Trojan horse in and it's like Book of Boba Fett, but then on the inside it is getting Grogu back to Mando.
I
That's not
haven't seen that, but that's appropriate.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
It
a good
just
summary.
it exists to get Mando and Grogu back together. Is the only
Yeah,
That's the only important thing so far that we have from the Book of Boba Fett.
yeah. Which was good. It was entertaining. It was so strange to go from this focus on Boba Fett and how he survives and how
Yeah.
he is moving into this, and then all of a sudden you're back to Din Djarin, and you're like, wait, is that I click on the right show? Like what's going on here? So it was
Yeah.
very jarring. There's really this
Jarring.
like good one. That was so on purpose. Um, like I love like Finnick and Cobb. Like I think they're really interesting characters. We got Cad Bane, which was super cool. But then you
And
have
then they
like
kill him.
you have like this weird biker gang that drives through the city at 2 miles an hour. Like it's just all over the place. And I just didn't feel like it had any consistency to it. But man, some parts of it I love though. Some of the characters I'm a big fan of.
When they send the major domo out to read that letter, that is like the funniest Star Wars thing for me. Like
Yeah, that is pretty
the
funny.
funniest non C3PO scene because 3PO has a ton of them. But when he goes out
Yeah.
there and he's like clearing his throat, and then he's like, "Oh no."
Yeah.
And they wrote essentially like to kick rocks on it. So that's a funny
Yep.
scene, but I think just kind of the out of placeness for me does it
Yeah.
as far as a C
I
goes.
agree.
I'm with you there.
Agreed.
So let's hop back over to the animated world. We can go with Rebels. Rebels to me is a banger. It's probably the best Star Wars story told start to finish as far as honestly, as far as any Star Wars goes at this point, because they went and goofed up the episodic story. So Rebels has a clearly defined start. It has a clearly defined finish with an epilogue that sets you up for another show, which we get in Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And it carries on the Rebels, to a T. To me,
Yeah.
Rebels is S tier. Even the episodes that are kind of the filler ones, like you get in the Clone Wars, because there's so many fewer episodes in Rebels than there are in the Clone Wars, they can't throw away as many episodes. So for me, it's S tier
Yeah.
all day. Kanan is one of the greatest Star Wars characters of all time.
Yeah,
And so,
totally.
and I know you're wearing a Rebel shirt, so like I'm
Yes,
sure
it's
you're
a
not
great
going to
shirt.
disagree.
This was a wonderful gift from you. I love this shirt. It's fantastic.
It took a
Yeah,
while to get
no,
to you.
I think, man, I think Rebels is just the culmination of everything they learned in doing the Clone Wars. Because I feel like it hits all the best beats of Clone Wars. It was
Hmm.
definitely shorter. It was more compact. I think that was intentional. I think they wanted it to be a more fine-tuned, cohesive kind of narrative.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think even some, not all of them, but a lot of the filler episodes even work to just create the relationships between the characters. Because it and a lot of the show falls back on who they are and how they interact, which is really cool.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think one of my favorite things about it is just the whole, and you see it kind of with Ahsoka too. Like Ahsoka's thing is, well, she leaves the Jedi, but Kanan's kind of on the other side of like, what do I do without the Jedi? And so it's really cool to see that whole master student arc of a guy who's just lost and just trying to do the right thing, trying to figure it out, and the whole way that plays out, and the way that Ezra becomes a Jedi because of that. And so I
Hmm.
love that story. I love the whole part of it. I do think it's definitely S. So, and I think that's one of the only ones I've watched in its entirety twice. So
I've watched it twice in its entirety too. Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's good.
for me, the best way to explain Rebels, okay, so if you're a basketball fan and you've like watched, The Last Dance or any Michael Jordan documentary, Michael Jordan was good from the day he like stepped into the league, right?
Yeah,
But he doesn't win a title for like years. So he goes through and he gets beat some, but he's still good. You enjoy watching him. He's exciting. For me, the Clone Wars and Dave Filoni, that's like the first few years before the title. Okay. So Dave is getting ready. Rebels is the first three-peat of championships for Dave Filoni. And then Ahsoka is going to be the next three-peat. So in my terms, Dave Filoni being the guy he is, that's kind of his arc. He learns kind of what he's doing with this Star Wars in the Clone Wars. And by the end of the
yeah,
Clone Wars, he's doing it as if he's, Rebels quality. Rebels is so good from start to finish. There's a ton of world building in Rebels. So the episodes
yes.
that are
Oh,
like
raw.
throwaway episodes, there's still world building. Like, okay, this is what the Empire has done to the galaxy. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's an episode where you don't just have the oppression of the Empire in some shape, form, or fashion. It
Yeah,
it never gets away from that. In Clone Wars, you can go off like kind of on some silly stuff and forget that there's a war going on. In Rebels, it's almost entirely like this is what the Empire's doing, and this is what we're doing to counteract it. You get
yeah,
Lando, you get Hondo, you get Leia, Ben Kenobi, Yoda. It's got it all. The Emperor, the
yeah.
World Between Worlds, Ahsoka. It's the most Star Wars feeling thing to me that isn't the original's six films.
Yeah. And one of the great things about it too, and then we can move on because I don't know, we don't want to
Yeah.
spend too much on one.
No,
I
you're
could
good.
talk a
Yeah,
lot about
you're good.
Rebels for a while. Is even if you move away from that main cast, they've brought in these other characters that they do really good justice to, like Rex and his clones, and like how great their arc is in
Mm-hmm.
Rebels. It brings Ahsoka and Maul back in, and how great they are in it, and how essential they are. Just the quick few minutes we see of Kenobi and Maul, like right that final sequence where Kenobi like just those little moments in and of
Yeah.
themselves are just so fantastic. And so even outside of you step away from these main characters and their great stories, it even still stays compelling with bringing in all these other who could have just been like quick and easy cameos, but they're really used really well. And so just all of it in its entirety is just really put together really well. I think is the biggest compliment I can give to it.
Yep. I agree. And at the Clone Wars panel I was at last weekend, they made it 5 minutes before talking about Twilight of the Apprentice and Rebels. So I mean, like,
Nice.
it's that good. They can't talk
Yeah.
about their characters, Anakin and Ahsoka, without going, oh, but in Twilight of the Apprentice. So it's just so good.
Yeah.
And
Some
I
of my
think,
favorite Star Wars TV episodes are from Rebels, right? That one, Jedi Knight, which is so good.
oh, it's probably the
Um,
best.
yeah, it's that's probably one of my favorite and most heartbreaking viewing experiences. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The I forget what the big lion looking guy. What's his
Bendu,
thing?
yeah.
Bendu. All
Yeah,
that Bendu
Bendu,
stuff's
the
interesting.
world between worlds, right? We get introduced to
Yep,
that. There's a lot in
it's
there.
all good. Yep. So let's move on. Let's be controversial. Let's go with
Ooh,
Andor. So Andor is kind of like the Last Jedi of Star Wars television shows. You know, the
it
critics are
is.
in love with it. A lot of fans don't like it, but then a lot of
Yeah,
like there's a lot of people who only watch Andor and they're like, I don't really care about the rest of Star Wars. A lot of people say it's boring. I will say that it is slow developing. I will not say it's boring because it's not meant to be entirely an action show. So if you're going into
yeah,
it thinking you're like guns blazing, Rogue One, Mando, all that, that's not what it was intended for at this point. So
right.
for me, the storytelling is excellent in it. It looks incredible. Like they obviously had a huge budget. Uh, the way they did, is it three separate arcs? Is that what this is? It three or four separate arcs? I think it's it.
It's
One of
yeah,
them
I can't
ends.
remember.
It's three.
Yeah,
One of them ends with the storm. The next one ends with the one way out or whatever, and then
and
the
then
finale.
the revolution thing. Yeah, yeah.
Great build ups, lots of great
Hmm.
world building. For me, though, I have a hard time getting as invested in it because it's not got the whole force aspect in it. So
Hmm.
that's my reservations. I don't know.
So where do you have it?
I'm between an A and a B. I could be
Okay,
convinced one way or the other.
so I this is one of those things where I need to see how it ends, right? Like I love Andor. I absolutely love it. I think it is probably the most well acted TV show.
Yeah.
I think the characters in it are phenomenal. Luthen is incredible. I think his character, the actor behind, like all. I mean, I think he's played so well. Um,
Yes.
it's different, and it was hard. It was a little bit harder to get into it first because I think one of the big differences is you don't have that. I feel like all throughout Star Wars, there's this resolution of tension to where you're kind of waiting on the next thing, but you're waiting in a place that's not awful. But throughout Andor, there's no resolution to any of the tension. Like the tension carries throughout the entire show, and it doesn't end. Like
Yeah.
even at the end, you're still in this tense place of not knowing what's going to happen. And so I don't know. It's hit or miss for people. I get that. I love it. Uh, the Prison Break, right? Kino
Oh,
Loy, Andy
so good.
Serkis, like that is one of the most well written sequences of TV,
Mhm.
right? When you come up to the final understanding of why he's been so hesitant and kind of what his sacrifice really is. And Luthen's speech at the end, I love his speech. I like that it raises the question of is there anything too bad? Is there anything you can do that's too bad when you're trying to upend something that's terrible, right? Like,
Yeah.
is there a line? Because with Luthen, there's no line, right? He sacrificed having a line, essentially. And
Yep.
I find that really interesting. I think it's a really interesting question to ask. So if Andor goes the way it has been, it'll be an S for me. I like it
Okay.
that much. But right now I have it at an A just because I don't know. It could go either way with the next season. But I love Andor. And I know that's not everybody's opinion.
I'm good with an A, like because it's good. It is well written.
Yeah,
Is it boring for someone who wants Star Wars action? I'm sure it
that's
is. You
fair.
know, there's
Yeah.
and and I've only rewatched it once ever, just because it's like a commitment to sit down and go
Yeah.
through all these arcs. And I think that episode is probably
Oh,
like
that's so cool.
the prettiest Star Wars
Yeah.
we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So
The
I
whole
give it
show
an
is just
A.
gorgeous. Yeah.
And
It,
Diego Luna's incredible.
oh, he's very good. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's a show that just comes down to personal taste. You know, I don't think it's
Yep.
whether I think it's just whether you like that kind of thing or not. And if you like it, it's great. You know, but if you don't, I get why people are not high on it. So
Yeah. I'm with you. Let's go let's go Visions. So Visions is kind of the odd man out here because it's
yeah.
not canon and
Right.
it's animated, but it's anime. It's a little bit different for me, and it's individual stories, so it's hard to kind of rank it as a whole. One was really good, two was not really good.
Yeah,
I'm
I agree.
leaning between a B and a C just because I don't care that much about it. Like, it's the stuff that's good is good. Like, it's high
Yeah.
points, kind of like what we said about Boba Fett. Its high points are really high, but I have only rewatched a handful of the stories.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think I'd sit it at a C, but because I think the first season was a B with some really
Yeah.
high points though. Like there were some really great episodes. You know, the
Mhm.
wedding is the one that always sticks out for
Oh,
me. I love that episode. It's so good.
it's really
Um,
good.
but then there was just it felt like there was a big drop off with the second season. It just felt like they were a little more moved away from Star Wars in some of the respects, and some of them were still good. Like we talked about it a few weeks back, there were still a few episodes we really liked, but you know, as a whole, if I look at both seasons together, I got to put it at a C. Just because you're right, there's not anything where I'm like, oh, I got to go back and watch this. There's a few episodes I
Yeah.
really enjoyed, but um,
Now, if
yeah,
you want to make like a
I don't
canon
hate it.
visions, like where it's not just a bunch of people doing their own story, but it's like an actual season
That'd be
of
interesting.
this, I would be
Yeah,
way into that. But that's not what they're doing here. So yeah,
that
C
would be
for me.
interesting.
Let's go with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Hello
Kenobi.
there. So for this one, oh my gosh, have you ever been as excited at the time for a Star Wars project as Kenobi?
Oh man, I mean, I don't know because that. I mean, it was really when we first found out what this was and who was coming back to it. I mean, you really were just like, is this like really like we're getting this like because this
Yeah.
was like the dream, right? To have this interaction between these two characters again in a period we've never seen them. Um, so no, I was super hyped for it.
I was so pumped with Hayden coming back,
Yeah,
and Deborah Chow directed some really good Mandalorian episodes. So I was like,
yeah,
wow, this could be really good. And it aspects of it, like we talked about a little bit earlier, but that last episode where Obi-Wan and Anakin are, or Obi-Wan and Vader are dueling, like, is it on a moon or
yeah,
something like that where they're doing it?
yeah,
That's probably the greatest scene Disney Plus has created. It's up there with Luke coming to rescue Grogu. It probably is better than that, because if you just watch episode 3 and then go straight to that episode, I mean, it's real. Like, that's good
yeah,
stuff. And so that aspect is an S tier thing.
mm-hmm.
The rest of the show, like the goons can't catch a 7-year old, Obi-Wan can't catch a 7-year old, an Inquisitor can't catch a 7-year old. An Inquisitor can get stabbed like 3 times by Vader and not die. Another Inquisitor can get stabbed and not die. An Inquisitor knows that Luke Skywalker exists. There's some stupid stuff in Kenobi. Vader can't get to Obi-Wan across the fire, but 2 seconds before
Yeah,
that, he had flung the fire to the side to walk through it.
yeah. I it I so first off, I agree that the end of that show is incredible, right? Like it's I think that last part is what everyone was wanting and waiting for, to see this final fallout and this final battle between them that would solidify to Obi-Wan who Anakin is now, and to really solidify in Anakin how his hatred for Kenobi at this point. And it does that so well. Like that it's so good. The cracked mask that's part Anakin, part James Earl Jones talking, like
Yeah.
it is so good. And so that is the by far the best part of it and some of the best Star Wars. But I mean, you're right. Like I feel like most of the show before that is just trying to find things to do to get to that point. Um, because I mean, there's some other good interactions and good. I like the interactions with Kenobi and Leia. I think it gives credence to
Oh,
why she
yeah.
goes to him later, right? Like I think that's great.
She names
Um,
her son after him.
but again, I think it was you who told me that somebody made like a movie cut of the show that was
Yeah.
just like really the essential plot line, and it flowed
It,
so much better. And so
it
it
cuts
just
out
speaks.
almost all the Reva scenes.
Well, that's unfortunate. Um, yeah, it was odd because it was trying to be about other things, which I don't mind. Like you take some of these plot lines and put them in something else. Make a show about the Inquisitors. I think that'd be cool, right? Like, give me an Inquisitor show about their hunting Jedi and their missions and stuff. That'd be really cool. But in a show where we're set up to get Kenobi and Vader, it just goes a lot of other directions and takes a long time to really get there. So that aspect of it was a little disappointing.
Yeah, and I'll just be completely honest. I think Moses Ingram did an excellent job with the hand she was dealt.
Absolutely.
I don't give two hoots about an Inquisitor that wants revenge on Anakin. Don't care. I don't think anyone should have known that was Anakin. I don't care that she wants to get Anakin, and I think a more satisfying end for her story and one that builds Vader up is when he killed her the second time that she actually died, and you get kind of like, oh wow, she tried, good for her, but Vader's Vader. To me, that would have been better.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it undermines Vader a little bit. The fact that he twice hasn't been able to kill, this character.
Girl.
So
yeah.
I think it's a character who you plop her down in any other show and build something around, like being an Inquisitor. That could be really cool. But it's not what people were wanting to see in this show called Kenobi that we're being sold on as Kenobi and Vader, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
No, that's my thoughts as well. So it's a B for me. It's a B.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. There's some great moments, and back when we did A New Hope, there's some great stuff that leads into it in terms of Kenobi's arc and his character. But there's some things that bring it down.
Yeah. Let's do Bad Batch. I want the main event to be Tales of the Jedi and the Mandalorian. So
okay.
Bad Batch for me, it's firmly a B right now. So it carries on the life of the clones after the war. I think that's super interesting. I think it tells just a lot of really deep stuff for an animated series. Omega is awesome. Such a good character. It is throwing in a lot of stuff that's going to help with the sequels, like with Palpatine's cloning stuff. I think it's doing some damage control that will be meaningful. Sid takes the show for me from an A to a B. Anything with Sid, honestly, is a C for me.
Yes. I'm so tired of Sid. It was fine when she was kind of a minor character. She was a good plot device. She gave him a place to stay and gave him missions, but then she just kept becoming part of the story, and I didn't understand why.
Season 2, she's no good.
Yeah. No. So, no, I agree. I would put Bad Batch at a B. It's solid. It's enjoyable. Like I said earlier, anything that continues looking at the story of the clones, I love. I like the Bad Batch characters, but I feel like I'm still even more involved with when they're still dipping into the clone side of things, because we're getting this really interesting story of within the Senate right now of how they're trying to figure out what to do with the clones and how they're going to retire them and what that's going to look like and what that means. Like, I find that part awesome and fascinating. It is.
It's like on a like a socioeconomic level. It's deep, like for an animated show.
Yeah. So this is a show that really in the next few months might bump up to an A for me, because if we get some resolution to that clone arc, I mean, because I know we're going to resolve the Bad Batch one way or another. Their story is going to come to a close, and I know it's going to be really good. It'll be emotional.
It'll be sad.
I really got to get some sort of closure on what happens with the rest of this clone army. Like, what is the final closing curtain on this, to where it leads to where, we find Rex and his crew just kind of off on their own on this planet with their little tank droid. And so if I get that, it'll bump it up to an A for me for sure. But right now it's a B, because it's enjoyable and it's a solid show.
It's got room to grow. It can go it could go C depending on how it finishes, but just after the trailer, I think it's probably going to be an A come May the whatever 1st or something
Yeah.
that it airs.
And
All right.
props to what's his name, Baker, for playing
D. Bradley Baker.
90% of the cast.
So he was at that panel
Good
I was
on
at,
him.
and anytime he mentioned tech, like the audience was like, "No."
Yeah.
And so yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
So let's go Ahsoka. I'm interested in your take on Ahsoka. So for me, first thing I want to say is S, just right off the bat, because it was so good. But at the same time, it's very premature to say that, because there's room to go down. If you're at the top, there's only one way to go. So for me, as just a safe way to put it, Ahsoka is an A right now, with room to move up there to S with Rebels, because Ahsoka continues Rebels.
Yep.
It does very good. We're not without our complaints. Like, I don't like how they make Sabine the fall guy every time. We've talked that ad nauseum. But outside of that, I think it's incredible.
Yeah, no, I think I'm right there with you. The characters, the continuity from Rebels is really good. The characters still feel like themselves. I do think Ahsoka's arc with Sabine's arc, again, just this whole master student thing we keep seeing throughout Star Wars. It's interesting and it's fun. It's great to see Ahsoka come to terms with this Anakin thing. And so all of that within it is fantastic. I think for me, it was I want to say it was maybe like episodes 6, 7, stalled out a little bit. It felt like it was taking its time, and it kind of moved away from some of our more interesting characters like Baylan and Shin.
Yeah, once they get to Peridia, yeah.
Yeah, but I agree 100% with you. I think if season 2 continues what it did in season 1 and does it well, then I have no issues putting it at S. But right now I think it's an A, just because cautiously waiting, right? I think that's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it's probably the Star Wars I enjoy most right now. So
yeah,
it's easily an A. Probably could be an S, but I don't want to jinx it. So.
Right.
So Tales of the Jedi is kind of interesting in that you can say, well, its story isn't quite told, but also it kind of fits into the Visions, where it's little arcs here and there.
Yeah.
So Tales of the Jedi is actually taking a complete picture and enriching a complete picture.
Yeah.
So the episodes are short. There's no room for filler. So for me, Tales of the Jedi is an S. There's nothing I can say bad about it.
No, I agree 100%. I think to take these characters and moments that people had become familiar with and then do like these vignette style shorts that really give you not just information, but like kind of emotional connection with some of these characters. Like the Ahsoka one was great. I loved how it tied in with season 7 of the Clone Wars. But man, those Dooku tales, like they were so good, because they give you such a great backstory for who you see when you go back and watch the prequels, right? And they managed to connect it so well where you still see the same character in the prequels that you saw in those little shorts, of like understanding, well, like, yeah, he's bitter, like he's angry, he's upset, like that. I get that so much now. And so they do with such a short amount of time and such a narrow perspective, they enrich a lot of the character stories that we're looking at, and I think it does it perfectly. I there was not one of those where I was uninterested or bored sitting through it. I was tied to each one pretty closely. So
and you can watch it all in like an hour and a half too.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So, and we're waiting with bated breath to see who we get this season. So I think that's on everybody's mind, is like, what cool stories are we going to get? Like, who's this going to be? So
I agree. And to me, like, when you combine Tales of the Jedi, plus I've read Dooku Jedi Lost, Dark Disciple, and one other one with Dooku in it lately. Can't remember what it was. Either way, I've read those, and just this whole picture of Dooku, he's turned into one of my favorite characters now. and just all this
Yeah.
extra stuff we're getting, and it makes the prequel so much better. So yeah, it's an S tier for me. The Mandalorian is the one that I'm most torn on of everything on this list.
Excuse me.
Because
I get that.
Because Mandalorian season 1, I had like virtually no expectations. I was all in on the sequel trilogy at this point because it was like, oh, J.J. Abrams is going to write the ship. So all my focus was like, oh, what are we going to get in the sequels? Well, J.J. didn't write the ship. He sunk it. And The Mandalorian was carrying Star Wars and has been.
Yeah.
So to me, seasons 1 and 2, I rearranged my Wednesday mornings around watching them. Like I would get up an hour early. We would do our morning routine, but watch The Mandalorian before I go to work. There are very few things that are going to get me up at 5 a.m. Mandalorian doesn't. So the characters are so good. It world builds. It's playing into this bigger picture. When we were first watching it, we had no clue. Like, oh, is this just going to kind of be its own thing? Is it going to tie in at all? Well, yeah, this is like the epicenter of Star Wars. Like this story is going to turn into our heir to the Empire. Luke ends up in it. You've got Ahsoka in it. Thrawn, it spawns off all this stuff, and it's even going to have its own movie. They announced today. We're filming this on Wednesday, so they released today. It's coming out in December 2026, The Mandalorian and Grogu. So for all intents and purposes, for what it's done for Star Wars, it's probably an S tier because it's been carrying Star Wars. Yeah. But season 3 gives me reservations because season 3 sucked. So I don't know.
Yeah, it was a show when it came out that it was like, well, this is why people are going to get Disney Plus, right? Like it's
the only reason
for a lot of people. It's what sold people on getting a subscription so they could watch this show because it was just much better than what was going on in Star Wars. And I think one of the things that's so great about it is it goes back to the original Star Wars and really just not feeling like it has to be crazy and out there, but like sticking to these character archetypes, right? Like Star Wars is totally based on these character archetypes that George Lucas, put in, and there's nothing super original. Good gosh, original.
That's a new one.
Yeah, new word for everybody. There's nothing super original about the story of a, kind of a by the rules bounty hunter who gets in over his head and turns to have a heart of gold and gets in deep with this. Like when you talk about it that way, it's a cliche thing, but it's done so well and it's told so well. It's those types of stories that we're drawn to because we love them. And I think that's what makes Star Wars popular is just the good and evil, the classic characters. And I feel like Mandalorian went back to that. Just this great tale about a character who gets into this situation and who he becomes and who he interacts with and this group that forms around him. And so, season 1 and 2 is fantastic. Like it is some of my favorite Star Wars TV, but then you bring up the point of season 3, which was, it was rough in a lot of spots. It didn't feel like it added much to anything. So I get where you're at. Like I overall feel like it's an S, but season 3 just makes me. Is it though?
Here's what I'll say: 1 and 2 being S, and 3 being A. It's 2-1, so it's still an S.
That's fair. I'll go with that.
It's still, math. I can do that, but it's still has room to go either way. But with The Mandalorian kind of being the home base for all these stories we're gonna get, I'm very confident that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni know where this is going. And so I think when we look back at 3 as a whole, maybe it had to be there to meet a quota or something. Maybe it had to be there just to advance a few story points to get to Ahsoka and what's coming next. Because it does have some big reveals like, oh yeah, Thrawn is out there and there's the Shadow Council is formed. Like there's some cracks there. So I think S is safe. It has room to go down, but it has room to cement it as well.
I would say it does enough to earn that right now I can overlook season 3 some because with how successful 1 and 2 is, I can expect a good season 4. And I think there's probably an
Yeah.
acknowledgement on their part, right, that season 3 wasn't as well received as 1 and 2, and I think they're probably not immune to being able to hear things and understand what people might be more drawn to. So I'm
Yeah.
optimistic that it'll pick back up.
I think it's going to be good. I think, getting to see it on the big screen, they got big plans for it. They're not
Yeah,
gonna
that's true. I
jump
mean,
it to the top of the line of all these movies. It was supposed to be like the second or third of the 3 films they released. Well, it jumped
yeah,
up to first. So like, I think
yeah.
Dave's got
So
something going with this.
they've done something good enough to sell it as a movie, right? Like that, because that's a much bigger investment. So
Lot, yeah. I'm with
yeah,
it. So, quick rundown of all of this. Um, Rebels kind of gets the nod at S for its
Mhm.
complete storytelling. Tales of the Jedi is just so unique and nothing's bad about it. The Mandalorian appears to have earned its weight there. Um, for the A tiers, Andor has room to go up or down, as does Ahsoka. Clone Wars is pretty concrete there. Kenobi's high points probably save it from being a C, but its low points keep it from being an A.
yeah,
The Bad Batch is likely going to be an A, and then Boba Fett and Visions are just kind of there. But one big thing to note is there's no Star Wars show that we've
yeah,
seen. Now, if I saw Resistance, it could end up in a D, but since I haven't seen it, I can
yeah.
plead ignorance and not rank it. So, just from what we've seen, there's nothing terrible. That's a good thing. Like, it's never a
Yeah,
bad
no,
thing that nothing's
there's not
terrible.
any of the shows that I'm just like, oh, I can't watch this. This is awful. Like,
Yeah.
whose idea was this? No, I mean, throughout all, even the ones that we rated the lowest, like there were moments that I enjoyed sitting there watching it. So that is a good thing to be able to say, because when you talk about Star Wars TV, it's easy to think it's a small thing, but it's
Yeah.
grown quite a bit and it's pretty expansive now with a pretty wide range of stuff. So
A lot of
for us to be able
stories.
to sit here and say there's nothing that we hate is pretty good. So
It's impressive considering the range for sure.
yeah, I kind of want to watch Resistance now. I feel like I'm gonna have to try to find time to do that.
I'm going to
So
keep it a secret. You
I'll
can
let you
watch it
know
and
if
let me
it's
know.
I'll let you know if
Yeah.
it's worth it.
So, looking ahead to next week, just real briefly, we are going to do a Bad Batch preview episode. So, we're just going to make all our predictions. So, we'll film it Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever works for us. You'll get it
Yeah.
on Friday. And then the following Wednesday, we have the Bad Batch. So, not sure where we're going to go after that. I don't know that we'll do like an episodic review of the Bad Batch just because there's a lot of it. But I
Yeah.
will say prediction episode next week should be fun. So I'm excited to kind of brainstorm where I think it's
Yep.
going.
And we'll probably, I would imagine we'll probably be able to do an episode at least after the premiere, because it's like 3 episodes, isn't it? It's a pretty
It
big
is. So yeah.
premiere.
Yeah, we should
So
easily break those down. But then
yeah,
after that, I don't know that we want to like every single week for 2 months break down
yeah.
the Bad Batch.
No,
But
I
I
think it'd
think
be
the
better to do it.
premiere we should.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Cool. And maybe roundups here and there. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we're at. Thanks for watching our tier rankings of the movie or the shows, not the movies. If you missed the movies, though, I'll drop a link in the description so you can watch that as well. Let us know what you think. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch y'all next time.